Next thing, NAS backup capabilities. So for NAS data, as you can see here, file share is now supported to add into Vim backup software starting from version 10. Okay? So version 11 just add on support for additional feature. So here you will see we have our production file share here running. Now the file share here, usually we are looking into like maybe Synology, QNAP, NetApp, all those NAS storage filer so-called, okay? That comes with an operating system that is not the usual one like Windows or Linux. Okay? So if you have a file share storage that runs like this is where we can utilize Vim to do a backup. If you are running Windows or Linux-based file server, maybe on a physical machine or a virtual machine, you can utilize agent or virtual machine backup to protect the data over there. Right? So this one usually will be used to focus on NAS data set only that comes from NAS storage system, what we call filer sometimes. Okay? So Dell EMC having their own, HP also having their own model. So with this, the only way to access the data will be via the normal NAS share connectivity. So from Vim here, we do offer these types of add-on to protect them as your source data. So in order for me to back up my NAS file share data, I will require a backup proxy also. Now the backup proxy here, we also call it the file proxy. Yeah? So remember, in version 10, they call it the file proxy. Okay, they call it the file proxy. This is the backup proxy that reads the NAS file share data on file level. So similar case, after I read and process the data, it will be stored into the backup repository. Okay, so I require another additional component here called the cache repository. So I need to prepare one additional repository that is stored closer to the file proxy and the NAS file share. So this cache repository is used to speed up your incremental backup. Okay? So this will be the similar case like your agent and virtual machine backup, where your backup server will be the one who initiate all the backup starting, etc. things like this. Then you see here backup proxy. Currently for the NAS file share backup proxy, we call it file proxy sometimes. This is the one who process the job, reads the data, apply certain compression before send over to your repository. So this backup proxy only supports Windows Server currently. Okay? It doesn't support any other operating system. Windows operating system is supported. It can also be the same backup server that you have, like simple deployment, for example. If you do not have any additional machine that's running, for my case, in my environment is a small office environment, I'm using the backup server as the file proxy also. Right? So next thing will be cache repository. Now we will need to prepare additional repository to use for this role only. This guy will be used to store the CRC checksum data in the machine to facilitate for incremental backup data comparison to speed up the overall incremental backup process. So if you did not select any other thing, maybe the backup server will be the one. You should select a dedicated server which are closer to your file proxy and the NAS file share to reduce network loads. Okay, so this is additional component works together with your backup proxy. Okay? So do not store or process real data. They are storing certain metadata for Vim to speed up the particular operation. So you will see here, to minimize the network load during backup, locate the cache repository close to the file share. In a similar case to your file proxy, ideally one hops away. So when you add in your particular NAS file share, so you can select Windows or Linux based. So this one usually you can utilize either virtual machine backup or agent backup. Depends on which one is easier for you, especially on the licensing part. Okay. So for NAS file share license, they charge one instance for every 500 gigabytes of data protected. Right? So it's all mentioned in the Vim license calculator. We do support NFS share and SMB share. So if you're using a normal NAS storage filer that offer these two protocols, we can add in straight away. Now, it's a bit different from your normal backup job. Okay. So for your NAS backup job, as you can see here, when I right click to edit, you can select which files and folders. Now this path, as you can see here from my environment, is already pre-added. It's a bit different here. Yes, we don't actually connect to the root folder usually. We will connect to individual path to the folder that you plan to back up. And then from the storage, you will see here, we do not able to choose our backup proxy nor cache repository. We can only select our normal backup repository where you will keep your backup data. Okay. So over here, where do we actually specify that? Pretty easy. Under your backup software, later in your lab, you will actually do this. Under inventory, when you go to the file share under SMB, for example, I'm using for Windows file share. This is where I can define my share path. Okay. So from this root share path, at least one root folder, we cannot connect to the file directly. We need to connect to at least one root folder. And then from there, we can detect the subfolder that you want to back up. Okay, no issue from that. So with this, as you can see, if I open up one of the NAS file share here to property. So first thing, I will need to define which IP address or maybe host name to connect to this NAS file share. And what is the account used for me to connect? So the account required will be minimum read for backup. So you need to have right permission to the NAS file share in order for you to restore your data. So in the exam, they do ask about certain things like permission options. For example, they able to back up NAS data in the environment, but when they try to restore, they have permission issue. Maybe due to right permission is not assigned to the account itself. It might possibly happen here. Okay, so first thing will be the account used. And when you go to processing, the second step. Now in the file share is where you can define who is your file proxy and then who will be your cache repository. So you will see the file proxy and the cache repository both stated in your SMB file share configuration instead. So your job itself will be selecting the file share directly that comes with these two options here. So when you look into choose, you can utilize any proxy automatically or select from a list that is fixed, usually closer to your NAS file share. And if you have multiple site deployment, then you might come with multiple proxy available for you to select over here. Okay? So this is added in the inventory file share, your file share mount path. Okay. Then only we can create our backup job here for NAS file share here. So you will see they will process based on the root folder that you actually add in. Then from there, they can able to detect what are the particular subfolder internally. Okay, so these are some of the examples that you will also see later when you actually configure your environment. So do read the documentation. They will give you some scenario-based story. They will also tell you what you are actually doing, what is the component you're actually adding. Read through all those things, and you know what you're actually doing during the lab. Okay. If not, if you put in the default next finish, it will able to work, but when we are looking onto performance tuning kind of configuration, you will lack of some of these basic requirement and dependency information that is missing. Okay. So over here you will see Backing up NAS data in Veeam, we are utilizing normal NAS file share connectivity. So we will have some limitation on log file. Now, this log file happens if the required backup file is still open or being used by user or application. The file will basically be locked in your NAS storage. Now, when they see this kind of files, they will skip and then retry later to see whether the file is available for me to back up or not. Okay? So if the file is still occupied, then they will skip and retry for a few times, and they will drop it entirely and without any warning. So if you do not want this to happen, especially during office hour, maybe you can utilize the snapshot folder. So on the left is NFS, share path access. On the right will be SMB, Windows space file share. So if your storage comes with maybe snapshot configuration, you can schedule a snapshot to run with script, etc. to run before a backup will able to detect the new snapshot created over there. So with this, we can able to solve the log file issue. Now, if you're running on SMB3, as you can see here, we can try to utilize Microsoft VSS snapshot in order to solve this log file issue too. Okay? If for some reason these types of option does not work, then you can still fail over to direct backup that might come with this issue. Okay? So this is the log file issue that might incur in your NAS backup that you need to be careful of it. So after we actually configure all the things, next thing we need to select our backup repository. Okay, so over here you will see first thing, we have this short-term retention. Now the short-term retention, basically when you go to your backup job later, inside your NAS backup job, first thing, you will have this what we call backup repository here. Now this is what we call short-term retention. Okay? Short-term retention, backup repository straight away. Then we have additional options later. Okay? Short-term is the one which is the primary repository for you to keep your backup data for your NAS backup itself. Okay? So let's see. This is short-term retention, the first primary backup. Okay, this is primary. Now for primary backup, pretty easy. We can select retention for days or months, etc. It will be supporting by normal repository or scale backup repository. So this one usually will be on-prem equipment. So your Windows, Linux-based repository server is supported, your NAS storage is supported, etc. All these things. Okay, so this is the first primary backup data that you can actually configure. That's why in order to fulfill 3-to-1 rules, this might not be enough. Okay, so we have additional options here. For example, if you want to perform archive, okay, this is primary, and then this is secondary. And this one is designed for archive only. So it will only utilize to archive old versions of data, meaning this guy will only store expired backup data, yeah? Expired backup data. Now you backup every day, every hour, and then you will not keep all the data in your normal repository for a very long time due to space consumption, etc. Now, those older backup data, you plan to move it to a different location or equipment. You might need to use it later. You have no idea. You just want to keep it as additional storage for you to use if you require it later. So I will then keep it into a long-term retention here. So long-term retention, we do support object storage if you want to. So here, they will keep those expired data for even longer time. So where is your long-term retention here? So when you go back to your backup job, okay, so we'll see here. So the one on top just now is your primary backup repository. Then in the same page here, you will see there's another additional option below. They call keep previous file version for how many years. So this one will be your archive. So you will see here, archives older versions of active and permanent deleted data. It is no longer covered in the retention policy using this storage here below called archive repository. So this is what we call long-term, right? Configured here in the same page. Now the problem over here using long-term is we can only keep expired data. That's why if you plan to fulfill the 321 requirement, this long-term retention archive repository will not be able to support that because your latest backup data, they will not keep additional copy here. They will only save those expired data that is not required anymore. It's just another additional copy for you to maybe retrieve due to certain audit purposes, etc. That you need to find it from this equipment. That's why usually this will be a cheaper one that can store for even longer time. So if you plan to fulfill 321 rules for your NAS backup data, then you need to go with another secondary copy. Okay, so this is additional options. Now, if you plan to fulfill 321 rules, I need to configure secondary copy instead. Secondary copy here, good thing is I will able to keep the exact same copy that available in your short-term retention. So your primary backup stays here and I can make a same backup file from it and store it into this secondary copy here. So it can be another storage equipment, another repository that also can be stayed in a different location. Using this secondary copy, we can now fulfill 321 requirement if you put in the equipment to the correct offsite location, for example. Okay. So this secondary copy can make exact copy and they can also have different retention policy. So depends on your requirement and objective, you see. So if you plan to offer 321 requirement, then you should go for the secondary target here. So here you can select who will be your secondary repository. I will be sending additional copies of backup data to this guy. And what is the retention policy you want to keep? Okay, so this one will give you one exact same backup data, even covering your latest NAS backup. Okay, so these are the two different options. One is secondary copy that can fulfill 321 rules. Another one we call long-term retention that can also support object storage that is used for expired backup data archival only. Okay. So usually for 321's compliances, we will utilize this secondary target instead of the earlier one. Okay. So it's all inside this NAS backup data. So if you go to backup copy job, we does not have any NAS-based backup copy job available yet. So the secondary copy will only be staying in the same NAS backup job configuration. Okay, so the backup copy currently is only used for particular virtual machine backup and also Windows computer backup here. Okay. If you have Linux, they can also make additional Linux backup copy job. Okay. So it's more towards virtual machine or physical machine types of backup copy. Okay. So this is very important here. That's why if you plan to do secondary copy, it does not require additional backup copy job. Yeah? It will be stayed together with your primary backup job configuration. Okay, so pretty easy here for your NAS backup and also repository. Any question they want to ask before I move into the retention options? Okay, so we already see what kinds of repository available and required to fulfill different objective here for your NAS backup job. Okay. Okay, so you will see here for retention options. Now, for Vim file backup, okay, file backup here, you will see that we are utilizing file versioning kinds of feature. So I have this production NAS storage. So this is your production NAS, yeah? And then this is your repository. Now, first thing, these 4 versions of file in your NAS, maybe it is pointing to the .docx, for example. Okay, document01.docx is a document file. Now, they come with multiple different versions because every day when I make a backup, they do have different changes going on. If I do not have changes to the file, it will not have a new version towards it. Now, this is only seen by Vim. That's why in your NAS storage, it will be actually the same file with different content and point in time data. First thing. Okay. That's why you will see ISO file. It does not have any version because ISO file does not have any changes altogether to speak of. Only normal document, etc. will require changes to internal content, etc. That's why this kind of file will usually come with multiple different versions. Okay? So when Vim actually try to make a backup, they will check first whether the file is having any changes. If yes, I will back it up and remark it into different version, indicating different point in time data and different time itself. Yeah, so over here. That's why you will see file V1, V2, V3, V4 is basically referring to the same file. Okay? In different time point, maybe Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. Now, when I make a backup, you will see that short-term retention inside your repository come with 4 different files based on different time frame. So in your production NAS, it's only 1 file. In your repository, it is considered as 4 files with different content to indicate different point in time. Okay? So when your file comes with multiple versions, then certain older version data will start to get expired. Okay? If you have ISO data like this that does not have any changes, the file will always be evergreen if the file is still sitting in your NAS storage. So this file will not be deleted, it is still being used. Your backup data in the repository short-term retention will always be remain. Okay? Now, if you have another long-term retention, okay, using object storage, etc., this guy can only use to keep expired data. So later, according to your backup job retention policy, I only want to keep 3 days of backup data versioning. File version 1 will start get expired. So when file version 1 get expired, indicating Monday data, yeah, because I need to keep Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, latest 3 days, file version 1 not only deleted from your short-term retention policy, it will also get moved to your long-term retention. So you will see the long-term retention will only able to keep expired older backup data. That's why if you want to restore latest data, long-term retention will not able to help you. That's why this guy is just for old data archival instead of the one to use to support 3-to-1 rules. Okay? And moreover, if your file does not have any changes, it will not get moved to long-term retention because the data is still active required. Once I delete ISO file, for example, in the production NAS, then it will be a different case. Deletion is also considered changes. So once the data got deleted in your NAS storage, then the ISO file will start to get expired too, because this ISO file in the latest NAS storage is considered gone. Okay? So the data in your short-term retention will consider be old data, and they will also eventually start to expire and move to long-term retention later. Okay? So this is generally how Vim actually organize your data set, okay, according to your retention policy and your versioning between short-term and long-term retention here. Okay, and remember, Vim NAS backup, we are looking onto file level backup here. Alright. So file versioning here, example. So the first version here, we are looking onto backing up data without any changes going on your production file. So first thing, pretty easy. The first backup, it will always be file version 1. Okay, day 1, first backup, no issue. So I pull all the data from my NAS to my backup repository. I have one copy over there already. Then, when I run a second day backup, no changes happens to the file in your production NAS. Vim will not read the same file again. No point because it's the same data. So Vim will just back up those data that come with changes and leave all these files that without any changes and remark the same file from the repository. So this guy will get remark update as latest data. So they are using method similar to reverse incremental, where I will remark all those unchanged files into the latest backup copy data. So with this remark going on, the file version 1 will be always up to date if the file is still available in your NAS storage, even though without changes going on to it. So the good thing here is the data in my repository will keep on get refreshed as the latest data if the data is still available, and I will not back up the same file again if I do not need to. Okay. So next thing, similar case, day 3, no changes happens. I will then remark again the same file to be the day 3 backup data copy here in my repository. So using this kind of method, most of the file, if there's no changes going on, it will sit in the repository until it is deleted. If not, it will get refreshed as the latest date until the file no longer in use. Okay, so this is another mechanism to tackle if the file does not have any changes rate, nor deletion. So if the file is not deleted, it is still stated in the NAS production storage, then this file will keep on updating, remarking to the new date in your repository itself. Okay, just to tell Vim, the data is still active, still available, just that they have no changes, remark the same file then. Okay. So this is the example where your file does not have any changes going on. I will just remark the file inside my repository. Any question for this versioning before I move on with the one with changes example? Okay, so you need to understand this concept before I move on with the one with changes. If not, it will get more and more confusing. Okay, so no question at all. Good. Okay, hopefully it's quite clear for all of you. Okay, so next one will be the example with changes to your file. Okay, so file version 1 will be your first backup, right? Day 1, first backup, file version 1, stated in your backup repository. Now, this example have some changes here. We are doing backup twice a day, maybe every 12 hours, for example. Okay, so day 1, backup number 2. Okay, when I plan to perform another backup time here, you will see when the file having changes in your NAS storage, I will back up the same file again and put it into my repository. From file perspective, it looks the same, but the content itself may be having some changes, either adding on additional content or deleted some content from it. Okay, so they are detected based on their file CRC checksum on the metadata set. If you have any changes to the file, that CRC check will have some changes. That is how they actually keep track which file and folders having changes over there. Okay? So not necessarily they change the entire file. It's only some content that is actually got affected. They will consider has changes already to the file. Okay? So this one is what we call file version 2. Backed up to your repository. Okay, no issue. Now, day 2, first backup when we run, Vim will check is there any changes to your files and folders. The same file detected a change again. Maybe after the last backup, somebody changed the content, adding some information to it. I will back it up again into my repository. So it will consider as file version 3 the third time I actually read the same file and write it into my repository. So in my repository, basically I have 3 different files in 3 different status, indicating the same file running in your NAS storage. Okay, so this is different file versioning if you have changes going on in your production NAS. So day 2, second backup, if no data change happens to your production data, then what happens? This file version 3 now will actually use remark. So I will actually tell Vim that, okay, the file doesn't have any changes. This file version 3 will get remarked into a latest point in time, okay, to indicate this is considered the latest backup data required. Okay, so they don't read file version 3 status again because it's the same content. Okay, so it's actually the same file in your NAS storage. Okay, so to go. And then day 3, similar case, if no changes still happens to the same file, I will remark the same file in my repository to be the latest state data. Okay, so file version 3 will not get expired earlier, because it is considered as the latest backup data. So after retention point kicks in, maybe file version 1 and 2 will be deleted, considered as the older data, but file version 3 will remain because file version 3 is considered the latest data and also day 2 data. Yeah, do you see the difference there? So this is how they actually keep track and keep updating your backup data in your repository. Okay. So day 3, when we have new changes again, we will back up the file again and now mark as version 4. Latest point in time data. Okay. So if there's changes, they will back up again. If not, they will just remark the same file until they detected a new change going on to the file itself. Okay. So this is what we call the version example when there's changes or without changes going on together inside your NAS file share. Okay. So this is basically the behavior inside your repository on how they manage the backup data there. Okay, pretty easy. Any question regarding the file versioning that you want to ask? Any question? Clear? Can follow? No issue? Okay, let's see. Clear, good, good. Thanks for the response at least. I know you all are able to follow. Okay, so now, next thing, let's move on. Okay, so for the NAS backup, we can also tackle on the folder level permission. So for a NAS storage, usually we will have different permission assigned to different folder tree structure, etc. Now, usually for a normal recommended environment, we will be using only folder level permission assignment. So when we back up the data, we will only look into folder level. We don't need to drill down further. And all your files and folder having inheritance permission configuration, then this will be easier. Backup will also be faster. But for some environment, they have special permission assigned, maybe based on different file or different subfolder that actually break inheritance from the parent. Then you might need to select the files and folder permission level. So they will drill down to the file level permission attributes at least to back up all those data or metadata it will be slower because I need to scan through the overall files and folders available in the NAS storage. Okay? That's why if your environment is not running on this special permission assignment, you should go with the default folder level only, should be able to get the job done. So we need to understand how customer environment works, then only we can propose which one will be better here. All right. Okay, so next thing we look into the component works together to offer the incremental data comparison that we require for the file versioning to work. Okay? So first thing, how NAS backup works here, as you can see, we require file proxy or the backup proxy, cache repository, and then your backup repository. So over here, you will see from the first backup, your NAS file share here. This is your production. Now inside a NAS file share, maybe they come with all your folder tree structure, for example. Okay, folder tree structure. Now this folder tree structure will also get updated into the cache repository here. So this one will be the last backup tree structure with CRC checksum data. So they're utilizing CRC checksum to offer something similar on tracking. Okay, so they will have the last backup record for the file proxy to use as a comparison. Okay, so the first backup, when you pull the data, they will update the cache repository on one set of CRC checksum regarding all your folders and files. So those are just metadata here. That's why your cache repository does not come with actual production or backup data over there. Okay? So this metadata can always rebuild. If it is missing when you perform incremental backup, your next incremental backup will be slower only. It will still able to make incremental backup, just that they need longer time to rebuild this particular metadata. Okay? So what this is for? Pretty easy. This is to facilitate Vim feature what we call change file tracking. Okay? So this change file tracking happens to keep inside the cache repository, works together with your file proxy, your backup proxy. So with the backup proxy helps to read your production NAS CRC check, they will compare with the one inside your cache repository. So after they compare, they filter out saying that, okay, file D is having changes. Because they compare with the last CRC check, file D CRC is actually changing in value. They will also affect folder 3, folder 1, especially on the CRC checksum. This is how they actually detect and finalize whether which particular files or folders is having changes. So with this, we are just reading the metadata from the NAS file share, compare using cache repository, and only tackle to read those change data. So by these kinds of configuration, we do not need to read the entire file share on the data level, and we are able to speed up a lot on the incremental backup process by doing this comparison using the cache repository here to fulfill the change file tracking function. Okay. So with this, we will help you to do the rest backend. You just need to select the correct component sitting closer to your file proxy and your NAS storage to fulfill this particular job performance, etc. Okay. Okay, so you will see here when we are backing up our NAS data, the first backup will always be full, like other backup itself, no other differences. Now the subsequent backup from Vim, it will always be incremental backup. Okay? So they do not read the entire file share data anymore, they just read the metadata to do comparison using checksum data, CRC check, to filter out those change data and then back it up straight away. Now this is the normal process. Over here, if you check on your backup data, okay, your backup data sits in your repository, right? Now, if the backup data in your repository for some reason having some corruption issue, then what you can do? First, in the NAS backup job, I can actually offer run health check manually if you want to. So I can run a health check to see whether my file backup data is still running fine in my environment or not, or I can edit, go to storage, go to advanced to perform a maintenance on my backup data. So this corruption guard also available for your virtual machine backup data and also agent backup data. So if I do it like every month or weeks to double check whether the data is still in good condition or not on a block level. So if yes, then I do not need to do anything about it. But if you get a report saying that, okay, your backup data in the repository is now corrupted, then what you need to do? Doing incremental backup on your NAS backup data, it will not be making any good, because if the entire NAS having some issue, you will see that some data might not able to get restored due to the corrupted data in your NAS, in your repository storage. So over here, if I want to run an active full backup, you'll see that from my NAS backup, when I right click, right, there is no active full here. So you can start, it will always be incremental. How to run an active full backup for NAS data? So you will see when you right click on your virtual machine backup, right, you always have active full here. But for NAS backup, when I right click, there is no active full. So this is for file backup, you see here. So in order to get the additional options to make a new active full, you can hold down Control button. Later you can try in your lab. Right click on the NAS backup job. Then you will see additional options here going on called the Start New Backup. So this is actually your active full backup for your NAS data. Okay? So this is mentioned in the documentation, but it doesn't mention in your lab or inside the material. I find it from the documentation because I do have this question to myself. Okay? So Vim NAS backup manual active full backup options. Okay? So you need to okay, hold Control key and right click on the NAS backup job. Okay. Then you will see another new Start New Backup. This is basically your active full again. Now, usually this will require more time because your NAS storage might be pretty huge. Okay? So if you really start a new backup, it will require more time. That's why this is a hidden option mainly for you to solve your backup repository data corruption issue. If you don't have those problems, or if you find that it's time for me to make an additional active full, just in case if the data is not going well and I have no idea on it, then you can run this option. Okay? But bear in mind, they will require more time because they are reading and backing up all the data again from a NAS and put it into your repository. Okay? So this is the additional hidden options that's not mentioned anywhere in the training and also in your lab. Okay? So you can try it later when you are testing on lab in the lab session. Okay? So you see here, creating file share backup. Now, as we mentioned before, if you have log file issue, skip files and folder will not generate any warning of failure. Okay? They just skip after a few retry, they will skip it. Then you will have some issue whereby certain data might get missing from a backup. Yeah, that's why it's pretty important, especially when you're doing backup during office hour. Maybe for this reason, you can put in more retry number in order for it to get the file backed up. Okay? So Linux file share do not use backup proxy. The machine itself acts as a proxy on its own. Okay? So these are some of the tips. And then when we are doing backup here, as you can see, in your backup job, we always have this additional bottleneck analyzer. I'm not sure whether you actually find this or not. In your virtual machine backup job, your replication, your agent job, even for NAS backup job, all these come with this, what we call bottleneck analyzer. It's a very cool feature here whereby every time when you run a backup, Vim will always try to help you to detect which component is your bottleneck. Which component is your bottleneck. So from here, at least you will know that each of your job when they run, which component is having higher load, first thing. And then this bottleneck analyzer will always be there. But it doesn't really give you a hint whether your backup is having some issue or not. Okay, just let me give you some example here. Okay, so earlier I do give some screenshot here, as you can see. Okay, so you will see that from my backup job, okay, I have this analyzer here going on. Okay, sorry, just a moment. Press on escape. So you will see this is my bottleneck analyzer. And now this particular line item will always be there in your backup job, your application job, any backup job that you have in your Vim backup server. This line will always be there, but it doesn't really indicate there's a problem in your environment. No, it doesn't. Only when you feel that your backup job is not meeting your requirement. For example, for my case, you will see that my backup job starts at 10 p.m. and my job able to finish in 7 minutes. To me, my backup job is running fine without any issue. Okay? I can meet with my backup window is completed in expected time. I will just ignore this bottleneck information. Okay, so for some reason, if you found that okay, your backup job is not completing in the expected time frame, maybe earlier when you first deploy, created a job, they can finish it within half an hour or 1 hour. Now when you run the job again, maybe they run for a few hours and they are still not able to complete, for example. Then it's time for you to check back onto this bottleneck analyzer again and see where does the issue actually stuck at. Maybe it's your proxy server having lesser resources that you can improve a little bit, or the network between your proxy to another Vim component such as repository is the bottleneck. Maybe you need to upgrade the network over there, or generally will be your repository writing speed is the bottleneck that slows down the entire backup. Okay? So this is some indicator to tell you that in your environment, especially your backup infrastructure, who is actually slowing down the entire backup or replication operation. So if you are utilizing some other functionalities such as maybe replication, then you will see proxy to proxy again to another target. So you need to know what job that you're running. And then over here, you will see I am running a backup job. So my source will be either your ESXi or Hyper-V machine. And then your target will be your repository. Okay? So depends on different job, they might give you different information here. But at least this is the basic troubleshooting for you to improve overall backup performance that you have. If you find that your backup job can complete within minutes level, it is within your expectation, then I will say you can ignore this particular line. Okay? So this additional information to help you in case you found that your environment is lower than expected, as you can see here. Okay, so it doesn't really give you information whether your environment is having some issue or not. Okay? It will always be there because when a job runs, there will be always one component having higher load usually. It will not be very even, but if the bottleneck generally does not slow down your backup significantly, we can just ignore this line. Okay? But it's there to stand by if you really need to maybe do some performance tuning or maybe to troubleshoot something, this line will give you very good additional information going on. All right. Any question regarding the next backup topic that you want to ask before we move on to the lab session? Okay, so this will be the last